I've never been to a community that wasn't full of people working really hard to help folks out of homelessness. But even as more and more people get housed, the overall numbers rarely seem to go down. Well, in most communities there are 50, 60, I've seen as many as 200 different agencies that touch homelessness in some way or another. But those folks all have different funders, they all have different compliance and regulatory requirements, and maybe most importantly, they don't report to each other. So there's really not an incentive for people to be working together toward a shared aim. And Built for Zero communities have done something that very few other communities have done, which is they've actually gotten all the way to zero for key populations. You've typically got to solve at least 4 big problems to make it happen. The first problem is simple. It's figuring out who's accountable. There might be 50 or 100 different groups that all touch homelessness in some way in your community, but it's usually no one person's job to make sure it all adds up to something. The antidote there is a shared aim, zero homelessness, with equally good outcomes for everyone, regardless of race. The most vulnerable people in our community slip through the cracks because no one really has an incentive to serve them. Right now, I think that's pretty obviously what's happening with Black and brown folks, with disabled folks. When we all agree to measure progress at the community level, instead of just in my program or your program, that's when shared accountability finally becomes possible. Once you have a shared aim, you need a feedback loop that can tell you how you're doing. Homelessness changes every day, but most communities only measure it once a year. Imagine if we tracked extreme weather patterns like that. Or COVID cases. Nearly all Built for Zero communities are now measuring homelessness comprehensively and in real time. And it changes everything. When you move from annual counts and patchy, cumbersome HMIS data to a real-time number that you can be confident in, you can finally see whether all those programs are adding up to a result or not. And if they're not, you have quality information that can help you decide what to do about it. The data can show you all kinds of problems, and then you can finally zoom in on the most important leverage points for getting to zero. Sometimes inflow data will show housing retention as the issue. Other times a specific population may be routinely staying homeless longer than others. Most often, better data reveals problems with the housing process itself. I remember a number of years ago, we brought together, I think, 7 different agencies to map out the steps that one person had to go through to access housing support in their community. And it took those agencies 3.5 hours to map things out. The result looked like a game of chutes and ladders. You looked at this and you just thought, it's no wonder people aren't making it through to housing. There's no clear process here. But when you can finally see that system, you can start to improve it. There are Built for Zero communities now where they've got this entire process down to a few weeks. And then finally, the place that I think most of us start, which is communities need flexible housing and service dollars that we know work to end homelessness. But here's the thing. Without a shared aim, meaningful performance data, and a housing process you actually have confidence in, it's basically impossible to implement new resources effectively anyway. The country is littered with communities that have pushed forward major expansions, only to end up with just as much homelessness as they had when they started. We can't just pump more money into a bad system and expect different results. I like to think of it as the operating system a community needs to end homelessness. From there, you can start to solve the big problems, like streamlining a bureaucratic housing process or better targeting your limited resources for impact. There's no silver bullet. There's no single law or program or policy that's ever going to end homelessness or eliminate racial inequity in the housing system. We've got to build a new way of working together so we can see these problems in real time and methodically manage them down to zero. To learn more, visit builtforzero.org.